So welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, wherever you're dialed in from today. And thanks so much for joining us. We're really excited to discuss how to get some proven ways to get more ROI out of your in-person events. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I am Chelsea Waxenberg, Senior Director of Sales Enablement and Product Marketing at Bombora, and I am delighted today to be joined by our panelists, Chelsea Madden, VP of Customer Success and Partnerships from our valued partner, Salesintel, and our very own Mackenzie German, Senior Director of Partnerships right here at Bombora. So Chelsea, I'm going to pass the mic over to you to intro yourself and give us a high-level overview of Salesintel, and then Mackenzie, if you could do the same for yourself and Bombora, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chelsea and Bombora, for having me. As the other Chelsea said, I am the VP of Customer Success and Partnerships up at Salesintel, and we have loved partnering with Bombora over the course of the 4 years I've been tenured at Salesintel. Been in the data space for 10 years now, and truly love it, empowering sales and marketing teams and customer success teams to leverage data in an extremely intricate way, right? A lot of times people just think of what Sales Intel does is provide contact data, but that's just an ounce of what we do. We truly are able to not only provide you with the types of companies you should be going after, and we can tell you why you should be going after them, as well as your buying center and making sure that you have the proper kind of all the proper data points to be able to be successful in your strategies. So thanks again, Chelsea and Mackenzie, for including me on this great topic. I love in-person events. And I've had the pleasure of joining Mackenzie at several of them this year, and which gave us this idea to kind of partner together. So Mackenzie, I'll let you take it from here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chelsea. So, as Chelsea mentioned, my name is Mackenzie Derman, and I am the Senior Director of Partnerships at Bombora. So thank you all so much for the time today. So, in my day-to-day role, I get to work with our lovely partners, of course, Sales Intel being one of them. And for those of you who maybe are not super familiar, Bombora is a B2B intent data provider. So, we provide you information on when companies are researching your products and offerings at a higher clip than normal. So, when that comes to the event space, there's a lot of different ways that you can leverage intent, both from a pre-event perspective and post-event perspective. So really excited to jump in and talk about those.
Awesome. And we have quite a bit of ground to cover today. So during the webinar today, you will learn about some strategies for hosting and sponsoring high yield events, effective budget allocation strategies, some methods to more effectively measure B2B event success, and ways to use intent data for lead nurture and really effective post-event outreach. And we'll also wrap up today with some Q&A at the end. So please feel free along the way to use that Q&A function in the webinar to ask any questions as we go, and then we'll answer as many as we can at the end of today's webinar. And I do want to invite you to use the chat function as well throughout to chat amongst yourselves, add commentary or color or, additional things that we may have missed along the way that you want to share with your colleagues and peers here on the webinar. So I want to start us out with a poll, and I'm going to launch it in just a moment. And we're curious to learn about what your current strategy is for in-person events. Is it all-inclusive, just sponsorships, collaboration only, or attendance only? So let me get that poll launched. Okay, so you should be seeing the poll now. And if you could go ahead and fill that out, I'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. And there's really no right or wrong answers here for any of the polls that we're going to do today. If you'd like to drop any context or alternative options into the chat that we haven't listed, you can feel free to do that as well. I'll give you just another couple of seconds here to answer. Okay, and it's looking pretty unanimous. So it looks like pretty much everybody voted for all-inclusive as their strategy, which is really interesting. And look, I mean, each and every one of these strategies has its time and place, regardless of which strategy you choose. Really, the thing that we want to do here is get the most bang for our buck and that ROI out of our event spend, right? So let's keep going. So to that point, we're going to jump right into strategies for hosting and sponsoring high yield events. So Chelsea, I know that Sales Intel had a very successful end-to-end experience with an in-person event in the recent past year. So could you just walk us through how that went for you?
Yeah, so I should start off. The caveat here is this particular event that I'm going to be taking you on our timeline for was an attendance only event. So we didn't have a booth or any co-sponsorships or any other events that we were working with partners. This truly was, how do we make the best bang for our buck by being boots on ground, walking around. So this strategy can be used for other events. We did then follow up and use this exact process for our Forrester, the Forrester B2B event in Austin a few weeks later. So essentially, what we did in January, we have a partner lead coverage who came to us and was talking to us about the logistics space, and we've decided to make a substantial investment in that space in general with our data. And one of the things that she had recommended was for us to attend this particular show called Manifest. And it focuses entirely on that space. So we researched the event to find out, are the people that are going to be in attendance, are they most likely going to purchase a B2B technology like ourselves, a lead gen solution? Are we going to be able to talk to sales and marketing executives? So that was the first phase. Like, we got word of this event that we hadn't experienced, nor had we ever attended in the past. And the reason being is that it was really out of our comfort zone, right? It's a very industry specific event. We found out that based off of our research and the previous attendance list, et cetera, and it was a good list, a good event for us to attend. So we then crafted our original strategy. And how we did this is we took the entire list of vendors and speakers from Manifest, and we downloaded that list. We just copied and pasted all the URLs and we uploaded it into Sales Intel. And once we did that, we determined the size of those businesses. We also leveraged Bombora intent to see who was surging. How many of those companies were interested in solutions that we are able to solve for? And we ended up by finding out that there was a total of, I want to say, close to 500 vendors. So, and sponsors in total, huge event. And we found out that more than 25% of them had surged on a solution or from a cluster perspective with Bombora on our product and or services. So we knew that there was really good synergy there for us to be able to make the investment and attend, but we also wanted to make sure that we had some type of pre-show plan. And we wanted to reach out to those vendors and ultimately the speakers because we knew who was going to be there. But that doesn't take into consideration the attendees. And without a booth, we don't know who the attendees are going to be. So what we ended up by doing is we leveraged LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, oftentimes when people are participating in an event, they'll post. The companies will post, "Hey, I'm attending Manifest." And we would be following the organizations that were most important to us in our TAM. And we started to capture who was going to be in attendance of that event without a booth, who was going to be walking the floor just like me. And so we decided that from those captures, from searches that we were capturing in LinkedIn, that we would also create those into our composite list of who we should be reaching out to pre-show. Our pre-show communication came directly from me. It was an email. And I was the only person that attended the event. It was an email that directly from me that was asking for 15 minutes of their time to meet and have a cup of coffee, or to meet and have a drink, or to meet and get breakfast or lunch or dinner, depending upon what the opportunity size was, essentially, of the company. So different companies had different staged budgets that I was allocated to be able to provide. And then from there, we then had myself continue to follow up. So I made phone calls to every single one of these. And the very valuable thing here is that we use Sales Intel data and our research team to make sure that we rounded out the buying center. So we would have the CEOs who were typically in presence at this particular event, and they were on my call list as well, not just their VPs of sales and marketing that would be in attendance and events people for their booths. So ended up by going into the event, which was in the middle of February, and I had 42 booked meetings before I even walked on the floor. And once I got there, we ended up by creating a Pictionary dictionary. And so every single one of my AEs and SDRs was responsible for giving me their target accounts and giving me a snapshot of Chelsea and Mackenzie's picture because I don't know what these people look like. And I'm walking on the floor. I can't be having my LinkedIn up and be like, oh, this is Chelsea. Oh, this is Mackenzie. Right. And I wanted to make it easy for myself. So ultimately, I had each day a target that I was supposed to be going after. So think of it as like a spy. Like it was kind of fun, right? Like, where's Waldo? Like, I would be looking for these people. And that was my mission for the first 2 hours. I'd be like walking the floor, figuring out how I could find them. And then I made that as my introductory joke. I was like, hey, I think you're just assassinated. And like, it would be like this cute little commentary that went back and forth. I explained what I was doing and why it was valuable, why I was coming after them. And ultimately, because we sell intent data from Bombora, I used our own system that way. I was like, this is really big brother of me, but I know that your organization has been actively looking and searching for weeks on end for solutions that I can help you provide. Is it worth your time for 5 minutes for us to have a conversation? And most often it led into those conversations. But I didn't have a booth scanner. Right? I didn't have people coming up to my booth and I wasn't able to scan. I wasn't giving away any attraction items. So I did something also that I think is really valuable is I stood out. I wore this vibrant green dress that everybody on the floor was wearing black and white. So you could see me walk through the floor. I wore a vibrant yellow orange dress the next day. Like I was like wearing neon colors. And the purpose behind it is that I wanted to make sure that when I walked by, people were able to see that like that zoom of color or whatever in the sea of black and white ultimately. And manifest colors were hot pink. So I felt like I fit in. But not to the point that I like made it like a rager or something. But I promise you, it was super valuable for us to have that type of extra element that made us stand out. And I wasn't going to wear a bunny costume, or I wasn't going to have like flashing lights or anything crazy. I've seen some people do that, and I love that if you have the the cojones to do that. But that was not me. And from those conversations, I used ScanBiz cards to capture their event badges so that it would then be processed into Sales Intel's data by my research team within less than 2 hours. My SDR team would then be able to reach out to them. And from there, we automatically created a post-event strategy. So I would communicate on an evening basis with my team. Here's who I met with. Here's who I have follow-up meetings with. Here's who they're booked with. If I didn't have it booked, my SDR would proactively engage to get those meetings booked. Any meetings that I had, I would transition over to our account executive. And it worked out pretty seamlessly in so much that it was one of the most successful event strategies that we've had here at Sales Intel. And so it was a lot of guerrilla marketing, right? It was a lot of boots on the ground and a lot of effort, but from end to end, it was I would say 5 week investment of our time and energy. And with the success that we saw from deals closed and an ROI perspective, we were able to apply that again, as I indicated at Forrester in May in Austin, and using Bombora this time to capture who was going to be attending events because Bombora has a topic for Forrester. So we could actually see what companies were surging on the Forrester events around the same timeline to create some synergies there for, hey, are you attending? If you are, let's do this. And that conversation created some more synergies as well.
That's amazing. So it sounds like Sales Intel had quite an exhaustive strategy to ensure success for the event. So particularly for this event that you just explained to us, what kind of outcomes did you see from that?
Yeah, so there's still we still have a lot in pipeline. So far, we've closed 4 net new deals. We've captured over 180% of all the costs and expenditure. And Vegas is a pretty expensive city. And I was grateful that my leadership team allowed me to take people to breakfast, lunch, and dinner, as well as like drinks throughout. So it was like a very nice kind of great trip for me, but it was also a great opportunity to kind of wine and dine prospects. So we've been super excited about the overall ROI that we've seen. And we have, as I said, several deals still in pipeline to continue to round that out. And then we apply this the same exact success strategy to Forrester, where we had a booth, and we've started to see the ROI automatically generated from that as well. Forrester was in May. We've already had 2 closed deals. So we're starting to see that momentum for that same exact strategy apply for the next event as well.
That's amazing. I love that. So Awesome to hear about that. Now let's talk about another pretty big deal topic, which is budget. And ensuring that budget is allocated properly really takes thought and planning. So, Mackenzie, can you talk to us briefly about some strategies that you know to be successful in ensuring that an event is successful, producing the biggest bang for its buck?
Absolutely. So when you think about budget, there's a lot to consider, right? And we have been talking a lot about conferences or being boots on the ground at conferences, but that's not the only type of in-person event that can be executed. As you all said at the top, you're doing quite a large variety of in-person events. It's a pretty exhaustive list, right? So when you think about that, there's a ton to think about. So first and foremost is contract negotiation. So whether this is for a conference, right, and you are sponsoring, and maybe it's your first year sponsoring, how can you think about coming to your contract negotiation conversation with things that are non-negotiable for you, and then also some things that are nice to have that you potentially could get added on for the same price, right? So this is something we actually got to put into practice this year at Forrester, which was awesome. So we were lucky enough that we had our legal team kind of standing by that we could sign our contract on site. So we got to pick not only our prime location for next year, but we are going to have several speakers again, which of course brings in a ton of leads and gives great visibility to our brand. And at the end of the day, the people who are negotiating these contracts with you are salespeople, right? And so they want this to close basically as much as you do, just as much as you need a contract and a venue, a space. If it's a conference, they need this to close too, right? They have a number to meet. So making sure you have your ducks in a row of what is my budget? Have I done this before? If so, what did I like about the show this year? Or what did I like about my event space, my venue space? If it was, like an in-person dinner or something like that. And how can I use that to my advantage next year or, next quarter, whenever this may be happening again, to get the best deal both for my company, but then also meet all of my non-negotiables and potentially add in a couple extras there as well. The second tactic would be leveraging partners and sponsors. So a great tactic for events, whether they're, just a co-branded partner dinner in a city where you have a ton of prospects or current customers where you want to remain sticky, or if it's a larger event, maybe you host a customer event for all of your end users or even your own customer conference. How can you leverage your partners if you have a partner ecosystem, or have sponsors come in and make sure it's a mutually beneficial agreement, right? So you're obviously asking them usually for a monetary buy-in. So what are you giving them in return to make sure it's worth their money? And then also understanding the tiers that you want to have, how you want to be approaching these conversations. All of your partners and or sponsors are going to have a different budget that they're able to spend on your event. So how many, primo sponsors or gold sponsors do you need? How many silver? How many, bronze? Whatever that looks like for your event. And again, having all your ducks in a row from the jump and ensuring you're organized around your budget and what you need when you go into those conversations with partners and sponsors, and being able to articulate the benefit to them. The third is target your marketing. So from a pre-event perspective, you have your contract done, you have your sponsor secured or almost secured. Next, you obviously need to market your event and ensure you have attendees. So whether that's, a large conference, like we've been speaking about Forrester, they need, a certain number of attendees and a certain number of sponsors in order to ensure their event is successful. Same thing goes for, even small events such as a local dinner. So using the power of both Sales Intel and Bombora, great way to target your marketing, right? You're going to have a marketing budget of X number of dollars. You want to pick the right channel to target your marketing and your audience, making sure that they're actively using those channels, meeting your prospect attendees where they live today, and then using Bombora intent to, just as Chelsea mentioned with her strategy, understanding when companies have intent for what your event is about, the content that you're going to be presenting, the conference name, what have you. And then using, of course, power of sales intel, firmographic data, contact data to understand, who am I actually reaching out to and making sure my messages get in front of the right people. Second to last would be setting clear goals. So this goes both for your budget and then also just for your event in general. So at Bombora, we did a couple new events this year, which were, always a risk, right? Anytime you do a new event, it's a risk. You don't know if it's going to work out. In Chelsea's example, it worked out great. They had an awesome strategy, but coming to the table with okay, we want to, send one person to manifest and we have X amount of budget, to her point, because we know this company has whatever budget to potentially purchase from us. This other company has this budget, right? So making sure that, if I am sending someone to an event or if I'm hosting an event, it's going to cost X amount of dollars, but what do I actually need to get out of that from an ROI perspective in order to be able to go to my manager or my leadership team and say, the event cost X, but I met, 5 out of 6 goals, or I met, 6 out of 6 goals, which is awesome. So being able to prove the actual ROI, but having those very, very clearly defined. And if it's an event you've done before, you can obviously rinse and repeat, right? So let's say you had 100 qualified leads from a show you did last year and you want to do it again this year. Is the goal again 100 qualified leads because the number went down? Or is it, 110 because they have a higher number of attendees who potentially could be a good fit for your sales team and to purchase your product? And then last but not least, prioritize key elements. So this, I would say, is more so from a user experience. So what I mean by that is if you're hosting someone, right, you want to make sure that you have some non-negotiables for their experience. So whether that's someone just attending a conference, whether that's someone sponsoring a conference, someone attending your, maybe a thought leadership presentation you're doing in a city or whatever that looks like, how are you making sure that both the attendees and sponsors feel like this event was worthwhile, it was worth their time, because they're also spending money to be there, right? And not only money, but their time as well. So are they, at the end of the day, having a good time? Are they relationship building? Are you forming strong relationships that you can leverage down the line, even if they aren't going to, be buying this quarter? But how can you tap into those later and ensure that your event overall was a huge success from kind of an experiential standpoint?
Awesome. These are all really good insights. Thank you so much, Mackenzie. So now that we've discussed sort of an example playbook of what a high yield event looks like and how to think about those budget allocations, let's talk about another very critical piece, and maybe the most critical piece to understanding the impact of that in-person event, right? And that is going to be success management. I want to remind the audience too, please feel free, drop any questions in the chat. I saw that someone raised their hand before. If you have questions, drop them in the chat, use the Q&A, and we'll answer those at the end. But Mackenzie, could you take it away with some of the more traditional ways that events managers and companies overall have looked at measuring success of in-person events?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about traditional methods for measuring event success, I will caveat this with, these are things that, yes, we view them as traditional. They're definitely not bad, but there are ways that we can improve on them. I'm guilty of every single one of these, even today, right? You'll hear me talk about some of these that are more traditional methods, but definitely some things we can improve upon, which Chelsea will jump into here in a moment. But to go through some of the ways that traditionally events were measured as being successful, that were maybe a little bit more simplistic. So first and foremost would be count badge scans or names captured. So we've all been there, right? We've been at a booth at a conference or at maybe like a dinner with some prospects, and we're like, great, I got, the persona at X big company that's on my named account list that I've been, dying to get in front of. And we just view that as a success because we had that head count, regardless of if the conversation lasted 5 seconds, if they, grabbed our swag item and literally ran away, whatever that looks like, you see that as, okay, box checked. So that would be the first method. The second would be swag distribution count. So if I ordered 200 hats, right, for a trade show, and now I have 195 left at the end of the show. Okay, great. I had, this many people come to the booth, and clearly, they grab swag. So therefore I'm getting, brand recognition or brand distribution, when we know, sadly, a lot of those items, end up in the trash or at Goodwill or, at a friend's kid's house, whatever that looks like. So not necessarily a true measure of success. The third would be post-event email open spikes. So this one I would say is probably the most controversial on the list. The reason being, think causation versus correlation. So yes, you may have a email open spike after an event, but how can we actually correlate that back to the event? Were they even in attendance at the event, or did my SDR team just happen to send more volume of emails that week, so we had a higher open rate? How can we actually tie that back to prove where we're spending our money is actually worthwhile, and this was driven by the event. It's great that there are obviously more email opens, but was that actually correlated to what we were doing and the efforts and time that we were putting into the event? Next would be cost of event remaining within budget. So obviously that is extremely important. Don't get me wrong. You don't, want to blow it out of the water and spend every dollar you have every time. But what is the actual ROI on that, right? So let's say I had $10,000 for an event. Great, my end cost was 9,500, but did I actually get qualified leads out of that? Is my sales team actually getting meetings out of that? If they're current customers who maybe were unengaged, are they re-engaging? Or is it kind of business as usual? But good news, I spent 500 under my allocated budget. Next would be sponsor satisfaction. So this obviously is one for people who plan probably larger events or maybe their own customer events. But at the end of the day, no one wants to have sponsors who are unhappy, right? So you don't want to just get anecdotal feedback, which is the last point there, but you want to actually understand what did work really well, even down to the nitty gritty, right? And what didn't work well. Maybe you thought something that was going to be very important to your sponsors, like an experiential piece that was pretty pricey, didn't actually have that big of an impact and no one really cared. So how can we iterate from there and move forward for next year, next quarter, if you're going to do the event again, and maybe allocate those funds elsewhere? Second to last would be basic headcount. So something I talked about a little bit earlier, but okay, I wanted 50 people to attend. Great, I got 50 people to attend, regardless of quality of a person. They're not saying they're not quality, but quality of being able to sell into them. Are they a decision maker? Are they an influencer? What does that look like? And then lastly, anecdotal feedback from everyone. So you don't just want to hear, from one random person, hey, that was an awesome event. Just like Google reviews, usually you get high highs and low lows. So it's important to understand and be able to quantify what actually was taken away from the event from a attendee feedback perspective.
Yeah. And just like you mentioned, Mackenzie, I mean, I think every company is guilty of leaning into some of these, and that is perfectly fine. But as we think about moving beyond some of these more traditional methods for measuring event success, Chelsea, I'd love to hear your point of view on how we could do that as businesses and as event managers to lean into higher impact measures.
No, of course. So first, I would start off with the brand exposure and social interactions associated with LinkedIn. I think that's extremely important. In any event strategy, you need to have some type of brand focus from the people that are going to be in attendance, as well as any potential sponsors, and like being able to connect the dots back to you, as well as your own company page. So making sure that you have some type of brand exposure and capture what that looks like from a following before and after, because there is an impact that ends up by occurring as a result of more visibility in the interactions, engagement, and conversations. The events that are non-events are becoming more and more popular. Those events where you don't have booths, but you just sitting around and having roundtable conversations where you don't have booth scans. And a lot of that's going to be about your LinkedIn connections. So making sure that you have a path forward to be able to capture how many people did you actually talk to, and were they qualified, and how do I get that back to my team to be able to follow up, because they might not be who who I'm going to follow up with. So be mindful of your brand exposure and your social engagement. In addition to that, Mackenzie, you touched on this a couple times throughout the course of the conversation today, is about attendee ICP fit. That is so important. I can't stress it enough. If you are hosting an event and your traditional customers that you've been successful with, not only closing, but continuing from a renewal relationship from an NRR perspective, are not in attendance, is it ideal for you? It doesn't matter if it's $10,000 when all the other spends are 50,000 or 100,000. Do you want to spend that $10,000, or should that $10,000 go somewhere else to help you with your customer retention or help with your ICP, right? So making sure that the attendee ICP fit is valuable. You can use tools like Salesintel to upload the vendor and sponsor list to get a really good gauge. People that are paying $100,000 for a booth at those events, if you're trying to dabble with whether or not that's going to be a good fit for you and you've never done it. If they look like you, smell like you, and they go after the same types of companies as you, then yeah, it's probably a good fit. But if it's not, then you need to use other resources, and being able to see the types of businesses that are in attendance, and the speakers that they have engaging those individuals are part of your persona and ICP. It's worth a try, from an investment perspective, in my opinion. The other thing that I would also talk about is engagement levels. Mackenzie, you talked about the value of booth people attending the booths, and if the leads were quality and whatnot. I would also talk about like the people you sent. I can't tell you the number of times that I've walked by a booth and people don't want to make eye contact. They don't want to have a conversation. They don't know who I am. They don't know the ability and my buying power or whatnot. If you're sending bumps on a log, you need to know that. And it's, we for our booth strategy, we have very competitive people, as you can imagine, in sales, right? So we actually make a game of it, and who can get the most conversations, who can get the most. And at the end of the day, it increased our engagement levels because we're all trying to go after the same thing, right? Drive engagement, drive brand awareness, bring attention to ourselves. So I strongly encourage the engagement levels, but you also want to make sure that those engagement levels come back to the quality. So that's why we do that Pictionary dictionary, where we have targeted individuals and in open opportunities or current customers that we want to track down and engage that we wouldn't otherwise. So it allows us to be focused on who we want to be talking to, and not just, all the other attendees. And then we offer, you talked a little bit about this, Mackenzie, is satisfaction surveys. When you're having an event and you're hosting a happy hour or having a dinner, you want to find out if people are happy with it, right? So taking in their consideration and their feedback is super valuable. You also highlighted this, Mackenzie, is like you're going to have the good and the bad, right? You're not going to have the in between. And that's where those engagement conversations, where you have anecdotal conversations after the fact, will be valuable too. Um, Qualified lead generation and revenue attribution, I think, come together with the attendee ICP fit and the engagement levels. One of the great ways to capture success is right now, how many, if you've talked to 50 people, did 50 of those turn into qualified leads? That's not going to happen to anybody. That's a ridiculous goal to have 100% turn. But if you focus on it, your people that are at the booth are going to be more focused on qualified lead generation. They're going to put more notes in to be more specific on your follow-up. It's also going to help your marketing team be focused on the buying centers of the individuals that stop by the booth, and be more focused on enhancing that buying center for top of funnel marketing. And at the end of the day, it's all going to lead to better revenue attribution for those events. And that's what we track, is the revenue attribution associated with the event expenditure. And it's been pretty successful for us thus far.
That's great. So I want to take another moment to poll our audience, and we want to hear from you. So out of these 6 different kind of measures that we've mentioned here that help us think beyond those traditional ways that we've been thinking about measuring the success of events, which are you most enthusiastic about? So I'm going to launch a poll here in just a moment. And I'm going to give you all about 30 seconds to pop in your answers. So is it brand exposure and social interactions, ICP fit, engagement level? There's lots to unpack in what we just heard. So very curious to hear how you all are feeling about that and what's getting you excited. Okay, get your answers in, just about 5 more seconds.
I can tell you which one I'm the most excited about,
Yeah,
Chelsea.
I'm gonna ask you about that in just a minute. We have a couple people more answering here, so I'll give them just another second. Okay, so we had a bit of a spread here, so you can see, the qualified lead gen was in the lead, engagement levels following behind, and then a couple of folks talking about brand exposure, social interaction, and revenue attribution. So a bit of a spread there, but clearly looks like that qualified lead gen is in the lead. So yeah, I'd love to know, Chelsea, from your perspective, and then Mackenzie the same, which one do you feel most passionate and strongly about?
So I am hands down on ICP fit. you can't have qualified leads, you can't have revenue attribution, and you can't have engagement levels if you don't have ICP fit. Like, what I mean by that is you think that you can't think of short term, you need to think of long term, where you're going to get the NRR, where you're going to get the best to success ratio, not just because you want the ROI for the show today, but how are you going to continue to maintain that customer relationship in years ahead? And that's your ICP fit. So hands down, and I don't think we overall focus on it enough of making sure that we have the right fit and analyze it pretty consistently.
What about you, Mackenzie?
I would echo Chelsea. I think you can have, the best team in the world at the event working their tails off, but at the end of the day, if they aren't somebody that you can, sell to or aren't going to be qualified for your product to begin with, it all comes back to that. So yeah, I would absolutely echo Chelsea, ICP fit.
Excellent. And yeah, I think all of these are super important. It's great to see that different folks have different ones that they're passionate about, but agreed. If you're not chasing after the right ICP, then it's probably not the event for you and not going to get you that best ROI that we're looking for. So finally, let's get into how to use Bombora when it comes to intent for lead nurture and then that post-event follow-up. So Chelsea and Mackenzie, can you talk us through how businesses and specifically marketing event managers can harness the power of sales intel and Bombora to drive impactful results together?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can take the first one, market coverage. So when you think about events beyond just conferences, right? It's awesome to know, and we've spoken about using Bombora and Sales Intel to understand when someone is showing increased research on an actual conference that you're attending. But even when you think about like webinar content, I know it's fun an in-person event, but still something you're hosting for people. When you take a look at your ICP or you have a domain list uploaded into Sales Intel, understand, okay, they fit into my ICP. Now, what are they showing intent on that we, sell? How can I use that information to arm my sales team if they are going on site to an event to have stronger conversations? And then also from a like webinar or event planning perspective, if I'm doing, let's say, like a thought leadership happy hour, what content do I even want to focus on to hopefully drive attendee numbers, right? So using the Bombora intent alongside the sales intel data can be a really good use case for that.
I definitely agree, Mackenzie, and I'm going to talk a little bit about data accessibility. It's great whenever you have the attendee list, but oftentimes that's not even shared pre-events. Being able to provide your sales team with the targets that you're looking for and the buying centers is really, really powerful. And coming off of leveraging who's in market for your solution, right? So Bombora comes in and is able to tell us who's currently exposed to problems that we have the ability to solve. And then Sales Intel can pull all the additional data on top of that to be able to have our SDRs engage with the right people, the buying center that maybe Tom isn't attending, but Harry is. And now we have the ability to kind of connect the dots for better engagement overall during the event process.
And personalization is just as important, right? So what your market is researching, you can tailor your messaging to that. You're getting these accounts and this intelligence out in front of your sales team. But from a marketing perspective, just how we talked about targeting your marketing, it's just as important to know what to say, right? We've all gotten, I'm sure, some really bland, terrible post-event messaging emails that clearly, went out to 150 people. But how can you use both Sales Intel data and Bombora data to actually personalize what you're saying, both pre and post event, to hopefully increase that engagement rate, increase, just the feeling that, wow, the company actually took the time to send me something personalized. So I'm going to, put more time into actually reading this email versus just hitting delete.
Mackenzie, the intelligent conversation component, I can't stress on enough the value of personalization. I gave the example manifest whenever I was walking on the floor and I found one of my targets and I was like, hey, you were just assassinated, and made a joke of it. The fact that I was able to show them the amount of research that our organization did on them, what they were actively like, so that we could have the intelligent conversation of what they were actively surging on, how we identified them, all of these other components, they were wowed. And I know that we sell that solution, right? So it was like, ultimately a quick little demo of what we can do for them. But the fact is that having those highly personalized, intelligent conversations, regardless of the type of organization you are, that makes an impact. That is a first impression. That drives the overall engagement of that lead.
Absolutely. And last but not least, none of these are going to be a home run, right? The first time you ever do any of them, you're going to have to iterate on all of the tactics that we've about today, not just on leveraging Bombora and Sales Intel together, but from every perspective. Maybe an event, went awesome this year. Maybe it didn't go great this year, even though you did everything you possibly could to prep, and you thought it was going to be worthwhile, and it just wasn't. There's no shame in saying, hey, I thought that was going to be wonderful. It was kind of lackluster. So either how can I iterate on that same thing and change it for next year, or how can I put, just as Chelsea mentioned, my money elsewhere that's going to be way more impactful. So yep, that's a great one to keep in mind. And I think with all of these, leveraging the Sales Intel data alongside the Bombora data can only make you more successful from the entire journey, pre-event, during event, post-event, as we've chatted through today.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, it's been really enlightening hearing about the power of Sales Intel and Bombora together. I do want to point out, just a quick stat. Even though this webinar was really focused on in-person events, we do realize that, especially in this post-COVID world that we're living in, there has been some shift towards virtual events that seems to be sticking in some cases. Companies having their conference completely virtually. So Mackenzie and Chelsea, just quickly in your opinions, a lot of this is still relevant, right? When it comes to completely virtual events.
Sorry, I was on mute. Absolutely. I definitely think we have our own user conference that's entirely virtual in October, and we invite prospects to attend as well, and speakers and vendors. And when you think about, like, from that speaker and vendor component, our partners that are going to be in attendance, we want to make sure that they have a good fit of the people that are going to be at our organization that are looking for their solutions, because we want to have that synergies. So we just do it the reverse engineer, right? We take our customer that we're going to have as a speaker and say, okay, here's your ICP, here's your persona, here's what we're feeding back to you, types of businesses that are going to be in attendance. It's mostly sales and marketing people in attendance, but here are your buying center contacts for there. And so we're providing them kind of spoon-fed leads for them to attend as a way to kind of drive engagement for an entirely virtual event, but we're doing it as an incentive for them in attendance of our annual event. I don't know if that's helpful, but it's definitely a way that we use Bombora and have in the past, as well as our Sales Intel data.
Yeah, for sure. I want to quickly get to Q&A because we do have one question that came up in the chat. How can marketing empower sales reps to use intent?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. Mackenzie, if you want to lean into it too, just let me know. So I would, Audrey, I would definitely say this is a problem across the board. So if you're feeling it, you don't think that you're in the minority here. Being on the customer success side of Sales Intel and such a passionate individual around Bombora's intent, I can tell you that most salespeople struggle on how to use it because they don't know how to. They think of it as like being Big Brother. Hey, I saw that you're looking for this. My solution does this. So the number one thing that I talk to marketers about is giving them templates that allow them to use clustered topics successfully and basically spelling it out for them. If company surges on any of these 7 topics, send this. If, like, make it like an adventure story. And it seems to work better that way, so that they know who they should be talking to, because the other issue that we come into encounter with is, I don't know who I should talk to. And because obviously Bombora doesn't give that from a privacy perspective, but if you look at your clusters of topics, you tend to get better positions of who you should be going after, and then your messaging can align with that. So it's truly about supporting them on not only the messaging, so that they know what they should be sending if somebody is surging on this, but also who they should be targeting, because those are the 2 things that they get pretty muddy around and get frustrated with.
Great. Thanks so much, Chelsea. And we do have one more question in the chat, but realizing that we are just about at time here, I don't know if someone wants to very quickly take this one. If marketers attend the event, how can they participate and help out as well?
Yeah. So, Mackenzie, I don't know if you want to chime in.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
You're killing it.
Take it
So,
away.
one of the things that I had mentioned before is the people that attend your booths, like you need them to be productive. And if you don't have a marketer that's going to be on the floor, whining and dining, shaking hands and kissing babies, then they shouldn't be there. You need to have somebody that's super engaging, that's driving, and that is equally as competitive as everybody else to make sure that you're taking full advantage of that, ultimately of that head count. So, I would recommend that the person that you attend is educated in the same tactics and maneuvers that the people that you're sending on the show, like from a sales and or BDR perspective.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. To be respectful of time, we're going to wrap here. That's all the time we've got for today, but we will be sending out a recording of this webinar in the coming days. And I want to extend a massive thank you to our attendees, our panelists, and we really appreciate Sales Intel's partnership with Bombora and your time today, Chelsea, joining us as a guest speaker. So have a great day. Have a great rest of your week, everybody. And let's get out there and get more ROI on our in-person events.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everyone.